Hello. I thought it might be helpful to give you a guided tour of the course content of Understanding 27001. So the course itself is for anyone that has a reasonable understanding of 27001 as a standard and what's required. It goes into the how of how to implement it rather than what it is intending in terms of words and content in the clauses and controls. If you need to understand that, then you really should start with the basic course, which is Understanding 27001. So implementing 27001 starts with being able to download a copy of my full toolkit. This is every tool that I use in terms of templates, documents, workbooks for implementing 27001 if I go in on a consultancy basis. So everything's in that toolkit there. And that stops you having to buy the toolkit separately. It's just included in the course price. So you can download it here. There are a number of modules. First up is laying the foundations, and that is about putting everything in place to get your project off to the best of starts. So there's an overview here of the approach that I'll go through, and it has videos, for example, that you can play that will step you through. And here's one where I talk about the 5 phases of the implementation and what's happening there each phase. So there's quite a lot of information there to get you a good feeling of what the approach is. And then I talk about areas such as building a business case. So it might be that you're told to implement 27001, and it might be that you are choosing to do it yourselves and you need to influence those around you that it's a great idea. Because if you try to do it on your own, it is likely not to go very well. So if you need to get support, I talk about what the critical factors are for success in a project and how to overcome resistance to change. And then I go on in the next section to talk about how to build a business case. So in here, there is a video where I go through how to construct a business case. Particularly, we focus on 27001 and the key killer arguments, if you like, for putting 27001 in place. And here you'll see that there's a template that you can download, which you can then complete and use for your business case. So there's lots of content there. I also talk about how to conduct a gap analysis. If you know that you want to understand where you need to be to reach 27001 and where you currently are, so that gap between the two, then this talks about how to do that. And it gives you the tools that you need in order to be able to go about gap analysis. So all the way through, I've tried to put in a mixture of content. There are videos, text, and interactive elements to the course. So if we just have a look at this video, for example. Before we start, and this one talks about how I create a gap analysis and what I'm looking for, and how I would present that back to senior management. And then I go on to give you a template that you can use yourself to create a gap analysis and what you should be looking for. So here are the mandatory documents, non-mandatory documents, and other things. Module 2 is about the initiation phase of the project. So here I'm talking about how to start your project properly, how to create a project plan. So here, if I click into the project plan section, then you can see that I'm talking about how to populate a project plan. There's a template that you can download and use, and what all the various steps and parts of a project plan that they would expect to normally see. I also talk about how to set up a steering group, because you're going to need governance. And ultimately for 27001, you're going to need that team in place, what the typical types of roles are and who should be in it, and what your terms of reference should be, for example. It's all in there. Another really important section of this entire course, actually, but particularly this bit, is the definition of the scope. So here I'm talking about how to define the ISMS scope, in that what's in and what's out of assets and what you're trying to protect and business processes and that kind of thing. It all needs documenting. And here I've actually created a video and a workbook that steps you through determining how you're going to define what your scope is. You might think it's pretty straightforward, but actually it's one of the most important things to get right, because if you don't, it's like holding the map upside down when you start a journey. It will go horribly wrong from the outset. And the further you go down the line with the map upside down, then the worse it will be on your outcomes. So I'll talk about that. I'll give you a copy of the workbook that you can download. And then there's more that you can go through in terms of working out and understanding really what people are looking for in that scope document. I also talk about then how to create an information security policy, how to define the roles and responsibilities. These are all crucial parts of 27001 that an auditor will be looking for. And I then talk about how to set ISMS objectives and what those might look like in the very first instance when you're setting off. Module 2 then is about planning. And here we are looking at largely risks. What are the risks to the organization? So you're going to need to create a risk methodology, which is a document that outlines how you're going to handle risks before going on to actually dealing with those risks. So this step you through the entire thing and how to create a risk assessment treatment methodology and how it works, for example. And then we'll go on to looking for those risks. Where can I find risks? Where would I look for them and then write them down? So there are many sources of risks, and this will step you through how you can go and find them and where they might be. Then you need to evaluate and analyze your risks before moving on to creating risk treatment plans. This section will walk you through how to create risk treatment plans. And then, of course, a lot of risk and a behemoth or something to wrestle with under 27001 is how to update the statement of applicability, which are 93 controls that you need to go through and either say they don't apply to you as an organization and why, or how you meet them. So once you've done your risk assessment and worked out what you want to do, then you have to put it into action. And that's really the implementation phase. And there are a number of lessons within here that we go through about implementing the controls, for example, creating an awareness campaign and what that might look like and how you can go about training and awareness for everybody, because people need to know about 27001 and good security practices before we go on to the monitoring and review, which is how to measure the performance of your ISMS, and then finally onto continuous improvement. So this will be things about how to handle non-conformances and how to take the feedback from the previous step, which is things like audits, internal audits, how to conduct an internal audit, how to put all those findings into place as part of your continuous improvement plan. The final module then is about what happens in certification and how to select an auditor, because they are not all the same. They do not all go about things in exactly the same way, even though it's the same standard. That means the length of audit and the cost of audit can be wildly different. So I talk about that and why you might want to take different paths through that audit process, depending on what your business needs from its certificate when it eventually gets there. And then it also talks about, well, what do you do potentially beyond that? And how do you put 27001 into practice and make sure it continually is improving and becomes part of the fabric of your organization? So that is the course content. And hopefully this has given you a better understanding of what's in there. If you've got any questions, jot them down to me and send them over to info@iseoblue.com. That's ISEOblue.com, all one word. Thank you.